special unscheduled talk because Mark George, probably one of the most influential, important agents of professional photographers with an incredible history in the industry and in the business, has joined us as a special last-minute off-the-bench guest. So, Mark, I think probably the best thing to do is start at the beginning and give us some idea as to how you became a photography agent and exactly what it takes to be a photography agent.
Okay. Well, I started in 1978, so that's about 33 years. I was basically doing nothing. I had a degree, didn't know what to do, but I was a motorcyclist. And I was motorcycling up in Scotland, and I ended up sharing a room in a hotel with a guy who turned out to be a semi-alcoholic photographer.
You're going to name who that one is?
No.
Okay.
And anyway, by the end of about 3 or 4 days of drinking with him, I ended up being his agent. And that was it.
But did you know what an agent was at that time?
No idea. I didn't know what the hell I was doing at all.
Right.
No idea. And there weren't that many agents around in that time. I mean, David Putnam had just stopped being an agent. He was a film producer. And there were about 6 other guys.
So we were talking about the early 70s here?
Late 70s.
Late 70s.
We're talking about 78. And then, so I came back down to London, which is where he lived, and I became his agent. And I pretty much just tried it out on a sort of suck and see basis. But he did tell me he was earning £400 a day when he was shooting, and that I'd get a quarter of that. Well, my mates were earning that a month.
Right.
They were earning £125 driving trucks and stuff. So for me to earn that much in one day, I thought, well, it's definitely worth pursuing this.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, if he gets more than one job a day, and if I get another photographer, then I can see the equation is working out.
So basic maths were involved?
Yeah, well, there is an agent. Anyway, so then I then just started going around with his assistants in terms of his useful. He'd been in the business for about a year anyway, having gone solo from assistant simply. So I had his address book, and I just started going to see people, and after 8 months of nothing, I got him some work, and then it just snowballed from there. And
how did you know what to do?
Just by instinct, really. I mean, I think you've got to have a certain level of colourfulness in your character to be an agent, you know. And the only thing I was scared of, and when I teach, and I do sometimes lecture to students, is the only thing I was really scared of, and it's what seems to be what they're scared of, is quoting. They're frightened of losing a job by quoting.
Yeah.
I figured out a way of doing that without making myself scared anymore, which is to just do all the expenses first of all,
yeah,
and then see what's left over for fee.
Right.
And ask the guys, you know, what have you got? And in a way, that kind of innocence appealed to some of these art buyers and advertising agencies, and they just said, oh, well, we can give you this much.
Okay.
When I told him he was getting this much, he was really pleased, and I was really pleased because it was more than we could ever consider.
Right.
Later on, when I got more mature and more aware of my ability to negotiate, I would start pushing for fees. And in fact, one of the reputations I do have in this business is I'm definitely one of the leaders, if not the leader, in pushing for usage. In fact, I helped write the original book that the Associated Photographers produced in terms of getting more money for additional usage over and above what the shoot was commissioned for.
Right.
And it's very important because as the world becomes globalised, I could see that a shot was no longer just going to be commissioned for London, it was now going to be going over to Paris or used in New York and stuff. And why shouldn't you be compensated? Because ultimately the business is getting less original commissioned photography.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, then you have to have compensation for that. So anyway, going back in time, I stayed with this guy for 2 years. His drinking got the better of him, and eventually I had to part company with him. But at that same time, I'd obviously met a lot of people in the industry, and I got calls from people saying that they'd like to represent me. And one of those was a great guy called Jerry Oak, who was one of the top still life guys in the business. And I remained his agent until he died a couple of years ago, suddenly 50 years old, but 27, 28 years ago it is. And then that led to another photographer, and eventually you get a stable. But I only stayed with 4 photographers for a long, long time. Many, many years. I only had 4 photographers, and they were Don McCullum, who I still represent, Paul Wakefield, John Parker, and Jerry Oak. And the business seemed to just work very well like that. It was possible to behave that way. But of course, all these photographers had assistants, and those assistants were learning well from these kind of master craftsmen. And they went out on their own, and they got assistants. So the big family tree snowballed. So the competition got big. At the same time, you started having the world, as I said earlier, getting globalised, which meant that the work was being less commissions, with more photographers going after those less commissions. So it became imperative for me, if I wanted to stay in business, to expand the amount of photographers I represented. And I didn't enjoy doing that because I loved just having the control of 4, but having spent many years just controlling 4 photographers' lives completely, it was a very good grounding for me to be able to expand. But I didn't expand to the level that some people. I've got a sort of. I share quite a lot of photographers with a New York agent. He's got 48 photographers, and he has about 10 staff. And you know, one girl will be looking after these guys, and another girl will be looking after these guys. I don't want that. I want to be, and always have one to be very hands-on, very close. So I only have one girl, maybe two, when it gets very busy working for me. So it's kept pretty small. But my stable sort of fluctuates between 11 and 12, 13 photographers because of that reason. I had to expand.
And on what basis were you choosing the photographers?
Always on originality, always.
Right, and on the work as well as the personality.
I mean, obviously, I used to represent Richard Avedon until he died. Obviously, I just took him because when he asked me to represent him, you don't turn down the guy who's probably, in most people's books, the greatest living photographer of all time. Now he's died, but you know, I was shocked when he asked me to represent him, and of course I was honoured and I took it on board. And the same thing with Terence Donovan. Terry asked me to represent him after years. I mean, I said to him, why on earth do you want me to represent you? You've been successful when I was still in nappies, basically.
Yeah.
Terry is a very funny guy. He just says, I like someone to be in the mix, and I want somebody else in my life. He never had an agent before.
No.
So these big name photographers, I would take them on because their reputation. I learned early on also it's not a good idea just to take someone on just because they are well known, because sometimes you come unstuck.
Yeah.
You might not like their work particularly. Big mistake. First number one, you've got to like their work. How can you be honourable and try and sell their work and back them and support them if you don't like what they're producing?
Yeah.
Second thing is you might not like them. So I did learn on a couple of occasions when I took on some photographers who were very well known, when I thought it would bolster my own career, that what a mistake that was. With Avedon, it wasn't like that, because I mean, you're talking about a very serious guy who produced brilliant work. It's obvious, it's a no-brainer. Terence Donovan was a no-brainer because he's such a brilliant bloke. He was an amazing guy.
Yeah.
And he produced.
I think very misunderstood as well.
Yeah, and he produced fantastic work. I already had Don McCullum right from the early days, so you know I'd already had a touch of representing people who were well known and established. But all the other guys I took on were not, and that's almost more enjoyable because you help them build their career up, and you get the satisfaction of seeing them become successful.
Do you think that's the agent? Do you think that's part of the agent's role? Is to actually to encourage and to nurture as well as to go out and get work?
It totally is. I mean, there's a lot of competitions, I say right now, and actually it's very